Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Steve Hayman. I'm a director of Chisma Building Contractors down in Sussex. We are sponsors of the Construction Excellence SECBE Awards for People Development, have been for about 4, 5, maybe more years than that. It's great to be involved in this summit today. It's a first for all of us, so bear with us, but I hope it all goes well. Just a quick chat through. The session time is 45 minutes. Our aim is to share some thoughts on leadership and hopefully inspire each other to consider and or change our perspective and improve the way we do things. Hopefully we'll have time for some questions from the audience. So please use the chat function for the questions. Oh, sorry, not chat. Apologies, the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. This session is being recorded, and it will be available on the website next week, and there'll be a link on the Q&A or chat box. So I'd like to first of all introduce the guest panelists. Fortunately, during the awards process, I was chair of the judging panel, and we managed to meet all of the guest panelists as they presented to us for their submissions. They were very good. I had a very enjoyable half a day on that, so it was great. So there's Mark Burton from Garenne Construction, Lee Adam from the Weybridge Group, Chris Townsend from Midas Construction, Lloyd Thompson from ICS Ltd, and Laura Hannon from Base Quantum. So there we are. So before we start, there's just one thing I want to put up. So can I have the next slide, please? So this is something that I can really relate to. It's a quote from a book. Wisdom comes from experience. Experience is often a result of a lack of wisdom. If we were in a real meeting, I'd buy a pint for anyone that could tell me who wrote that. But there we are. So what we're going to do now, while you consider that, while I expand on that, is ask the audience. There should be a poll coming up. There it is. Please pick one statement that you think is appropriate to how you think, to what extent you're prepared to let your employees fail. And while we're looking at that, I'm going to open up by mistakes. When you don't get to my age by not making a load of mistakes, too many to mention. One mistake I made was I got married very young and I got divorced. I learned from that mistake. I learned that no one else would put up with me, and I remarried my first wife, and I think we've been married 36 years this year. So I learned from my mistake. That was a bit drastic. From a work point of view, my business partner and I took on a failing company, construction company, 12 years ago. There was a management buyout to save it going bust. We invested some money in it, bought the company. The strategies and the approach that my business partner and I used were largely based on what we'd learned from mistakes we'd made in our own professional careers and mistakes we'd watched other people, including our bosses, make. So we learned from those mistakes. We developed a team ethos in the business. We tried to motivate our staff, to instill pride in them. We had a known blame culture, but we expected people to take responsibility. We don't give people responsibility, they have to take responsibility. And as a result of that, and it's still an ongoing process and we're still learning, we've had a lot of loyalty and a lot of commitment, and we have people coming to us because they hear about us and they want to work for us. Now, before I then go back to the panel, have we got the results of the poll yet? Because that would be an interesting starter. Here we are. Okay. Well, I'm well impressed with that. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, that's good. So if I can throw it open, if I can't see anybody on the panel. So, there they are. So has anybody in the panel, hi Lloyd, has anybody on the panel got anything urgent they want to say before I start asking some questions? Or any contributions they want to make? If anyone wants to fess up to their own mistakes and how they've learned from them. No, don't all rush at once. Okay. Right, so I'm going to, unfortunately for you, Laura, you're the top left of my screen. So
okay.
What do you do to create an open culture in your business? What does your business do to create this open culture?
Well, picking up from the poll, it was great to see actually that the no blame culture and everybody in it together as that team mentality is obviously being effective and used within our group of attendees today, and that is something that we've really advocated and wanted to make sure that we have lots of opportunities for people, that we give we've got their opportunities for them to try different work and to develop themselves with their own self-management and understanding that they can strive and they can get to where they need to go. We give the opportunity to people to make decisions, and I think that's an empowering position to feel that you're part of a team and that you've got a say in actually the outcomes of your day-to-day job role and the company's direction going forward, because everybody's voice has a value, and their experience, whether it's with or without wisdom, can definitely be something that can be beneficial for our business, and I'm sure others on the panelists today. And
how do you communicate that to your team?
So I think actual communication methods have to be strong. So we have internal intranet systems where we're able to show people's experiences on projects, what they're working on, what we've been doing as a company, even down to just successes personally and in educational successes, so that seeing what other people are achieving and that there's a goal or that you could aspire to do something that somebody else has actually been able to achieve in their day-to-day or their career is a really positive attribute that we've got, because we've got people striving and therefore goals for other people to be going towards. So we've communicated that internally. We use LinkedIn very much for our external promotion of actually the successes, and I think achieving and demonstrating that we recognised that and we're wanting to share it internally and externally. There's a pride, there's a want to be involved, and it's a healthy competition for people's own career ambitions.
Okay, thank you. Chris, I'm going to come to you next, but before you answer it, I'm just going to give something. There's a bit of a joke in our office, and I don't want this to be taken literally, but it's like, if you make a mistake, come and see us, we'll help you, we'll support you, we'll work your way through it. If you make the same mistake twice, that's a lifestyle choice and we have a different conversation. It's not quite as strict as that. It's usually 3 or 4 and we try to train people and help people. So Chris, how do you communicate that to your team, and how do you deal with those that, that fail more than once and need that extra support?
So I think the first thing is it's about the autonomy that we give the individuals and the areas we allow them to be in a position where they might make their mistakes. And I think so depending on the individuals, the role they're in and their level of experience, we might give them more and more responsibility. And on occasion, if they haven't had the adequate training or we don't feel they to do certain tasks, then we won't ask them to do those areas, because the risk of failure might be too great, and that's not fair on them because we're setting them up to fail. But also the areas around which they can fail, there are some, we look around here, if we're talking about certain health and safety areas or certain legal requirements, we're not going to put a trainee in a position where they could, or someone who's less experienced, where they could fail in that situation, because that could be relatively damaging to them. So I think the first stage is choosing the areas within which we give people autonomy, and that will vary depending on kind of the role they're in, and actually then the risk of failure isn't as great, and then we can use it as more of a developmental tool if they do fail in the lessons learned situation. Now, don't get me wrong, we will have situations where we will fail and the impact is greater than that. I think if we use health and safety for an example, we try and so we've got a very good return rate on individuals giving near misses and as identifying areas of a near miss. If we had a strong blame culture, you often see those near misses. They're the things that don't get reported on because people want to keep it under wraps because they feel they're going to get castigated because they've not reported, or because they've had an incident and then and then the manager comes in and swings a heavy axe. So And that's because of the culture that we try and take, where it's a lessons learned, we do a reflection. It's not us investigating them, it's us doing an investigation together. And then the outcome of that is often a toolbox talk or a reflection or review of which the individual is part of the learning process. And actually, we did one recently where we had an incident which didn't cause any real injuries, but could have done. And the individual was involved in it, and they actually ended up doing a toolbox talk, which we recorded to go out to the whole business. So actually, in some respects, they were involved in developing and training others as a result of learning from their mistakes. So I suppose that's a long-winded way of saying, I think we initially, it's about giving people the opportunities to take on autonomy where they might fail, where the ramifications aren't so big, and where actually they're less likely to fail because they've got the skill sets and the knowledge to complete that task. And then obviously, as we give them more and more responsibility, that will change. And the second area is that actually we take a no-blame culture initially. You're absolutely right, Steve. Obviously, if repeat mistakes happen, then, we have regular catch-ups as part of, like I'm sure everyone does, like PDRs. We in between PDRs, we have our clear catch-ups, or kind of formal. And it's during those process that we will be looking at kind of if there was repeat mistakes made, why that's happening, what we can do to rectify it. And obviously, depending on what they are, that could be a whole long list of things that might be an outcome. But we're kind of we're formally kind of capturing that and putting a formal kind of training or support plan in place to try and overcome it. Obviously, 1, 2, 3 years down the line, as you said, it's a slightly different conversation. But initially, that's a positive discussion and looking at what we can give them support-wise, training-wise, information-wise, to try and stop the same thing from happening again in the future.
Okay, thank you for that. It's interesting what you say about health and safety. We had an issue a number of years ago, 5 or 6 years ago now. We couldn't believe how good our health and safety statistics were. And when we looked at it, it's what you said, the people weren't reporting the near misses. So we did similar to what you said. We had some sessions because we're only a small business, so we can have team sessions with everybody from the business in. We've got a nice courtyard, so it's great. We can stand out there in the sunshine and have a chat, and then some toolbox talk. And then, our health and safety statistics suddenly weren't looking quite so rosy. They're still pretty good, but not quite so rosy. But at least we know, and as you say, the lessons learned have gone out there and have definitely benefited. So you can see that has been a useful outcome, if you like.
Yeah, it's often the accidents go down, but the near misses go up, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, I was going to come on to you. So carrying on from everything we've just said. So apart from dealing with it without apportioning blame, I'm going to get onto one of my, there's always been a challenge for me. When you're not apportioning and blame as well, how do you deal with people that won't buy into it? And sometimes they're the ones that I call the energy vampires. And I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. But how do you manage that? Because I'm coming back, which I think Chris said, you don't always succeed. I had an energy vampire and I completely failed to turn that person around, and I've regretted it. I always wish I knew what I should have done differently. But so I'm asking you now.
Yeah, thank you for getting the easy question. It's quite a challenge, isn't it? We working in the Channel Islands, we actually invited the head coach from Jersey Reds, the rugby club on the island, to give a talk to all our directors and staff. And one of the things he raised was the role of a terrorist, which sort of exists in the sporting world. And we were talking about it in terms of what does that mean in terms that, is that positive conflict? Is it creative challenge? You need different thought processes, different ideas. We can't all be exactly the same, otherwise it's a bit predictable and a bit boring. But of course, on that, I think the underlying thing, as you would do with the sports team, is the culture and the values have to be the same, because the ultimate thing is to play hard, win, and get the best out of each other. And I think that follows through to business. We work very hard with all our staff. We're a relatively small labour pool. So, the one thing that I always say is we really must make sure that we've done everything possible to allow our staff to succeed. And if ultimately you get to that point where you feel you've done everything you possibly can, and it's just not going to work, well, there is an inevitable consequence, unfortunately, to that. But I think the real driver to that is make sure that you've actually done everything you possibly can. Because more times out of 10 in our experience, that actually if you work hard at it, you will find a solution to that one.
Yeah. And again, from our background, we've had some people who in our early days, when we took over the business, we thought they would never make it. we persevered, and they've gone on to become, great parts of the business. So and to be fair, a couple of guys, okay, they didn't fall into that category, but they had limited experience, a lot of knowledge, and they were very well qualified. But and they're now both directors on the board and part of the succession plan as a result of that, encouraging them to make mistakes and admit their mistakes and learn from it. And they've got a lot to share with us and the rest of the team as well. So Lloyd, coming to you. So what sort of training do you have in place? And again, how do you communicate that ethos down to your team? Because you in your presentation, I think I saw your arm once, and it was your team that presented. So I'd be interested from your point of view.
Well, in that instance, it was very nice to actually just sit behind the screen and watch our young ladies present. We actually have a social media team here who are all young and all female, and which obviously in the construction industry is quite rare. So it's a great opportunity for them. But I think actually one of the original statements is actually sort of quite a negative statement, isn't it? And you're saying, why is the statement not to what extent will you let your employees succeed?
You're not the first person to say that.
Well, I know Mark.
It was meant to be deliberately provocative.
Yeah, and because in some respects it's for us to give them the skills, knowledge, and confidence to not be fearful of a wrong decision. Those that work with me, I'd rather have a wrong decision quickly than a slow decision. So that it keeps things moving. It's those sort of ones that I'll punt that out to a month later, and that's way too late. And in our industry, you've got to move a lot quicker. So I think it's giving everybody the confidence, because if you get used to making decisions, you become better at it. I think it goes back to your sort of original thing about how do you gain wisdom, and that's it. If you're protecting somebody, and obviously you've got to sometimes provide a safety net. There's plenty of ways. There's no way that, say, somebody's going to do something at ICS that puts us all in a catastrophic position. There's nothing that anybody could do that could be that dire that we could not sort out. So I think it's giving everybody that confidence that, do you know what, anything you do, it can't be that bad. So I think that's it's where we work with people to make sure that's where we're training people to sort of just make decisions and stick with it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Lee, you're not last for any reason other than you were the last one across my screen, so apologies for that. Derek's just posted up a Branson quote, which is train people well enough so they can leave, treat them well enough so they don't want to. And as I mentioned in my opening statement, we've touched wood, he said, our staff retention rate has been very good, and we're not the top payers in the area, but a lot of people work for us because they know we try and keep their life work balance correct and whatever. I know your company's a little bit more quick turnaround than a lot of us, but can you talk us through basically what we've just said? How do you instill that into your staff and your team and make sure things make sure they understand? Sorry.
Yeah, to echo everybody else's comments, really, again, the biggest thing is engagement. If a member of your team feels valued, if they feel they've got a voice, and they've got a platform to be able to voice that. I think Laura said, she uses various intranets and stuff like that. We're dealing with predominantly drivers and construction type people in the waste industry side. So we looked at ways to try and find how to engage with them, at least using health and safety as an example. We set up a training platform, and we actually called it Round One. So it was in sort of terms of boxing and MMA, UFC fighting, because putting up health and safety signs, they'd seen them 100 times and they walked past them. So we put some people in PPE and some people in some like head guards for boxing and boxing gloves and gum shields. Said, would you go get in the ring without safety equipment? Would you come to work without safety equipment? So you need to find ways to engage with your staff that they can relate to. There's no point putting messages out there or asking your staff to do, as the guy said, and they're not realistic goals or they're not realistic targets. make things achievable. And as the board has said, if they fail, go through it with them, explain to them, again, make them feel comfortable to make mistakes. There is the key point, though, when it comes to the point of you've made enough mistakes now, that's when you need to performance manage more. And I think that's just as important, because it gives a clear message to the whole team that if you're not achieving targets, you're not, engaging correctly, then you give them a good development plan as to why they're not. And then if they choose not to do that at the end of it, I will say nobody comes to work to have a bad day, but some people don't want to work and they find various reasons to not do it how the business wants us to do it. So as long as they've got those guidelines, then we can work with them, can support them, train them, give them upskill them if needed. And then if not, the difficult decision is, you need to look at, is that person the right fit for your business? And it's not always the case.
Okay, thank you. Before I ask my next question, has anybody got anything else to add?
I was just going to add on to the end of what Lee was saying about performance management, which I agreed with. The performance management has always looked at a kind of a negative aspect sometimes, and I know on occasions, obviously, it can mean you're going down kind of formal routes, but actually it shouldn't be. I mean, your general PDR process, your quarterly catch-ups, that's all about managing your performance. And a lot of those will be positive discussions about how can we improve, where's your kind of skills gap, knowledge gaps, what can we do to help you plug those, what have you learned from that error. So I think sometimes people hear performance management and kind of shudder, but it shouldn't be that way. A lot of the time, performance management is a positive intervention.
And Chris, I think the key point is as well, if you've got a team of people that are all performing and engaging with the business, and you have one that isn't, that's getting away with it and is allowed to get away with it, that brings the other team down. So it's all about sharing with the team, and the team know that, and it's a very simple process, but it can be difficult.
Yeah, that's interesting, Lee, because that was going to be my next question. Yeah. So if some people in the team think other people are getting away with it, recently my business partner said to me, if we don't deal with this, we're just going to look like we don't know what we're doing, and the message that's going to send out to the rest of the team is not going to be very positive. So I'd be interested in any examples that anybody's had, or if anyone's got anything else to add on what we've already said. But has anybody got any strategies to deal with that apart from full and frank exchange of views?
I was going to say, I think the first rule with something like that is to deal with it quite quickly. I think the longer it goes on, the more the issue becomes, and then the more people get frustrated and the more difficult the conversation is further down the line. So, so my top tip would be to try and nip it in the bud early doors, really.
I think also that if you've got to that point, I don't know the circumstance and wouldn't want to guess, but if you can try and put in practices that avoid having to get to that place where there's that unsettlement in the office or out on site or whatever your industry and sector is that you're working in, that's got to be the goal, hasn't it? We all, I'm sure, do personal development reviews. We've probably got mentor systems set up. I know, we do. We have line managers. We're there. There's an open door process for our staff to feel that they can have that discussion. And I'd hope, certainly within what we're trying to engage and promote at base, is that if there's something that's niggling a staff member or they're not particularly happy, or perhaps actually they've interpreted something and they don't know the wider picture, and actually if they got given the opportunity to hear what the situation actually was, it might firstly settle them and they need not have that dissatisfaction that they're bringing to the office or their work environment. And actually you can clear it up or give them some options or a focus on something else. Because I think if somebody's got an issue at work, or they're uncomfortable, or they're not feeling that perhaps their voice is being valued as much, then giving them the opportunity to do that and not feel that they need to start impregnating that in the rest of the workforce and employees and the staff and actually the goals we've got as a company, then it's easier to move past it, away from it, and it's become insignificant actually in the wider picture of what we're all trying to do.
Okay, thanks for that. Sorry, Mark. Go on.
Yeah, just adding a slightly different dimension is also, in the example you use, Steve, sometimes we can concentrate on what are the problems, but we shouldn't forget that if you've got a good site or a good person or a good team, why are they good? What is good? How do you recognise it? How do you celebrate it? But how do you take those learnings and share them with the other team members so that you raise the standard. So rather than coming down to the weakest point, you actually raise the whole team to achieve the best possible outcomes.
Okay, thanks. Well, it's interesting because we've had the example I just quoted was a very rare one. We've had a couple of things where we have discovered that there is some resentment, and in most cases we've spoken to the people that have been affected and explained why the person they resent what's going on, because they're sometimes not fully aware of what's going on. But it's interesting, going on to the main subject of what we're talking about. We've made huge strides, as I said, in health and safety and getting people to come forward and report near misses. We've done huge strides in people relaxed and know that if they make a mistake, as long as they tell us, take Lloyd's point, as they tell us straight away or as soon as they know, we can deal with it. We've got, again, repeating Lloyd's thing, we've got the knowledge in this business or people we know outside the business that can pretty much help us to resolve any problem that comes up. We've got the expertise and whatever. But the other thing we're doing great inroads with another organisation we're supporting is mental health in the industry, and we're getting some very positive outcomes from that. And again, that's like a snowball effect, that one or two people have come forward for some help. They've been prepared to share it with other employees. So that's been really good. Anyway, I'm going around a bit of a convoluted way. What we have struggled with is where we've had some people leave for either because they were invited to or they made that decision themselves. And we've realised that a lot of people have been pleased at that outcome, but nobody had ever come forward and voiced their concern. And that's something that we're trying to manage. We want people to tell us. And it's a bit like, well, I don't want to stir it up and blah, blah, blah. But there are times when you've got that person that's bringing everybody else down. And sometimes, we're only a small business. We employ 63 people directly plus our subcontract supply chain. But, sometimes we miss that. And I don't know if anybody else has come across that. And if they've, as part of the people development review, do you ask them how they're getting on with their co-workers? We do ask that, but we tend to get platitudes back. Discuss.
So the times where that's happened, it normally then erupts into a really big issue, doesn't it? So something's been simmering along under the surface, and then suddenly it becomes a big issue that you weren't really aware of. I think I'm sure, like others, we try and instigate lines of communication, whether that be through our PDRs, through kind of one-to-one catch-ups. We do employee surveys, which are anonymous, where we try and ask questions on a whole raft of areas like management. We sometimes, for more senior people, will do 360-degree feedbacks where there's been particular feedback. If we've seen a lot of stuff coming out of, like, for example, every time a leaver leaves, we do a leavers report or interview. We sit down and ask them why they're leaving, and obviously they vary quite a lot. But if we start to identify certain themes, we will try and take an initiative, and that would often involve the management, and they're quite useful for discussion forums. But yeah, I think the difficult thing is when you end up reacting to what could have been a big issue, which at the time, if you had known about it a lot earlier, you might have been able to do some of the stuff that Laura and Mark were referring to earlier to try and mitigate the problem months and months before it becomes a much bigger issue. And then you have to do things like sit down with individuals and try and repair a damaged relationship.
Okay, thanks. Lloyd?
Yeah, indeed. I think what we have actually, so we have an office manager who I think is a bit like a company mum, where, she's a trained mental health first aider, but she's got a position literally that is bang in the middle of the office. And that way, that information can be shared. We've got, let's say, a finger on what's happening. It's a case of, a bit like your office, we're very open plan here. So we do know what's going on, but unfortunately the thing about mental health is you don't know what's going on between people's ears, do you? So that's slightly more difficult to track. But by having, let's say, that sort of eyes and ears everywhere, that brings things to a fore. I think people who may be working in boxes in the corner, you're less likely to know what's going on there. So yes, I think this sort of having a company mum is a huge benefit to this company.
Can we have a company dad instead? Sorry, Lord.
You wish, of course you can. Yeah. Well, I suspect we're meant to have other options as well.
Yeah. No, I'm only kidding. Go on, Laura.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, I think if you're thinking about it as people development and the generally when people are working in a company, that company is theirs as well. As much we talk about it as a vehicle. The company is the vehicle for them to drive into their own aspirations, and in turn the thought leadership element of that is that the business succeeds based on the success of the individuals as well. But people developing people to see actually what other opportunities there are and how they might stretch their wings, and may mean that actually they leave us at a time and because it's right for them, because actually they've got a direction that is important to them in their career journey that we'd love to support, but maybe we're not right to be able to do that. And the advantage of being able to have those open discussions has meant that actually we've seen people come back. We've got 4 or 5 that left or went away for a few years, and they've come back stronger with things that we could learn from where we were. And we'd like to think that actually we gave them the foundations for them to be able to take those opportunities and then make that decision to come back. Because, a career is a long period of time, and to expect them to stay with us for that entirety would be great, but it's probably not likely. So if they come back and we get to benefit from their learning again, then all the better for it.
Yeah, thank you. Funny enough, one of my sons did that. He hasn't come back yet, but we're hoping he will. But hey, so I know, and he made the right decision. I've had no problem. He made his decision for all the right reasons. Right, and there's a number of questions in the question and answer tab, so I'll try. We've got just under 10 minutes. So very quickly, I'm only going to do it in order of the time the questions came in. So Cheryl said, with the continued increase in foreign labour, is there a language barrier to communicating knowledge, and particularly with health and safety, and how do you deal with that? Has anybody got a particular, I think, Lee, that might apply to you particularly?
Yeah, we have quite a transient group of staff out on our waste yard operations. I think the key thing is to find that everybody has the same access to all the safety rules, safety policies, procedures, signage. So some of our signage is in Romanian because we've got quite a large Romanian team. And then also finding somebody that can communicate that. So as part, I think Chris mentioned again, pre-briefs in the morning, stuff like that. They will have a safety briefing, and it's done in both English and Romanian. That way we feel as a company that everybody's got the same message, and they have also the same engagement back with us. And then they will all sign a document to say that they've had that meeting, they've had that pre-brief, they understand it. And that just covers off from a business point of view as well, that we are conducting that. Because again, we can do all these things, but we also as a business need to have a track and trace process of recording everything in case you do have any incidences, whether they're near misses. And I think, it was important earlier that someone mentioned about the near misses. We've had a few near misses, and it was related to culture. And it was something really silly. In our canteen, we had COVID rules put in, and it's a small canteen. It sounds really posh. It's not. It's a double-sided porta cabin, but it's a canteen area. And our Romanian team were going in there, and they were putting things like tinfoil in the microwave and stuff like that. They didn't understand that you don't put tinfoil in the microwave. I'm sure they've got microwaves in Romania, but for whatever reason, in the UK, they were wrapping stuff up in tinfoil, and you was hearing the crack bangs, and so we had to get that message across. And it was like, no, that's what we do all the time. But it's a different culture difference. It's here in the UK, you don't do that, you can cause a fire. So we just had to have those conversations. And again, it's just making sure they understand whether it's English or Romanian or whatever language.
Thanks, Lee. I want to move on. I want to try and get as many of these questions done as I can, so excuse me. Sue has said, behaviours play a key part of the performance management process. Not many companies include behaviours and focus on deliverables, but behaviours impact on teams and performance. Oh yeah, so taking up from that very briefly, my business partner spent some time at a PLC. I haven't worked for a PLC in the construction industry. I don't think I'd last very long. I'm not very forgiving and diplomatic. But yeah, my business partner bought a thing from the PLC he worked with, which was leadership shadow. which I thought was nonsense. That isn't the exact word I used, but that's what I said. But over time, he's absolutely right. If our teams, all of our teams, because we're a small company, they see the way we behave, they see the ethos and the core values of the business, and if we display them to the team, it does make a difference. I don't know if anybody else wants a quick comment on that before I go on to the next question. Just got a few others. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I can follow up. It was similar to what Lee was saying earlier about the kind of cultures, wasn't it, and behaviours and things. I think for our so we've done something similar where we tried to look at kind of, we were very focused on performance, against the job title, but actually we felt that in order to make kind of cultural changes, that actually the thing we need to focus on was kind of common behaviours. So we've identified kind of our core behaviours that we want all staff to display in Midas, and we feel that if we, as a group, if we're all displaying those behaviours, then it will contribute towards us delivering essentially better products, deliver better products for our customers. So we use behaviours as part of a recruitment process, and stuff that I'm sure that if we listed a list of 4 of behaviours here, we'd come up with a similar list really. But that's what we feel help for us to deliver our kind of be leaders in what we say, customer service and performance. So yeah, we focus very much on attitude and behaviours as well as technical competence, which is important. But we've tried to much more get a balance towards attitude and behaviours. In that it's probably in some respects easier to develop people's technical knowledge. But changing behaviours and attitudes is a little bit more difficult sometimes, and that's something that we try and kind of adapt in at recruitment and get that right.
Yeah, funny enough, that's one of our sayings in the office is we recruit for attitude and train for skills, if we can, if that works. Malcolm said, do the panel have views about IAP? I think he means IAP, investors in people. I think he means as a framework to raise standards. Any comments on that? And I've got two more questions after that, so we've got 6 minutes. Does anybody else have? We don't have IIP. We decided to go with the ISO 9001 and what we do generally. But
I can give my view on it. I mean, I think it's quite nice to have something of benchmarkable standard. Similar to yourselves, we actually didn't go through with the IIP in the end, but we used a lot of the standards to benchmark what we do. And then didn't go through the full shebang because actually in some respects we're ISO as well. So actually the work involved in actually getting the IIP accreditation at the end of it, some of the bits we felt was unnecessary for us to jump through those hurdles. But it is nice to have a benchmarkable standard like ISO or IIP, which at least lets you know that you're getting it right and you've got someone who can come in and kind of, obviously we didn't go through the audit process, but we got to the extent of having the auditor in, who came in and had a discussion with us, but in the end we decided not to go for the full shebang. So, but it's nice to have something to benchmark what you're doing against, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you. Well, ours was similar. So we've got a couple more questions. Adrian, how do the panelists encourage a culture where you fail quickly, i.e. rather than trying to force something to work that clearly won't, someone being honest and just saying this isn't working, so let's stop and try something different? Well, again, we've had that. I had somebody was actually on notice of redundancy, and in a conversation about his redundancy, he said, well, because I used to do this in the past. And I went, well, I wish I'd known that because we need someone to do that. And what we moved him to, he was absolutely brilliant. In fact, he went on to leave. And funny enough, he contacted me yesterday for a reference. But so that's my view of, sometimes both parties know it's not going to work. We got 5 minutes left. Anyone want to comment on that before I do the next one? Or no? Okay. And then Cheryl's come back with a comment. How are you dealing with peers above the levels of the office mum or dad who is mentoring them? Who do they turn to when they need help? What about the directors, those taking the brunt of their decisions? Do you engage with outside agencies to assist with this? Anybody want to talk about that? Or Laura?
Yeah. I mean, so even at the higher levels, we've got quite a few staff who are studying as well in that masters. I'm doing my MBA. Duncan, our CEO, has done an MBA, and I know that he's had his mentor from his MBA actually came and did a director's day with us, and actually the culture that we're we're bringing forward into base. We talked about with all the directors. We spent a whole afternoon running through what aspects of it, what it meant to us, how we interpreted it, and then how we could be supported going forward. And we've done similar workshops since. So it means that actually the culture that it disseminates down actually through the process. We as directors feel that we're informed so that we can actually be talking all off the same hymn sheet. It's a consistent approach.
Okay.
So yeah, we are supported.
Thank you. Lee, you've got 3 minutes.
Yeah, just another one. What we do with our SMT, we do a 6-month MOT. So we invest in the directors to go off. They have a full medical, actually physical medical, and as part of that, they have some time put aside where they actually have a specialist that actually goes through, how to manage stress and the pressures of work and everything else. Because let's be honest, not many directors want to speak to a mental health advocate, within the business, because unfortunately there tends to be a lot of, well, that's somebody, I don't want to tell somebody lower than me, somebody in a lower grade than me, how my mental state is, because again, it doesn't send a good reflection for the business. So we go to outside sources.
Okay. All right. Well, unless anyone's got anything burning they want to say, I'm going to wrap it up there, because I am allowed to wrap up early, and I'll get a pat on the back from Tina and the rest of the team. I just want to say thanks. Can I just say the best of luck to all of you? It was a really good submission. So from all of you, from everybody, it was great. And I love those days because I learned so much. And I hate those days because me and the other panelists have to make decisions, but it was brilliant. So hopefully I'll see you at 5:30. You'll be pleased to know I will be wearing my dinner jacket and my bow tie. And I will be having a drink in my hand to toast the winner. So obviously I won't see you, but you will see me, sadly for you, briefly this evening. So look forward to that, and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thanks very much.